Senator from California.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we are anxiously awaiting work on the transportation bill that came out of the Environment and Public Works Committee, which I am proud to be the chairman of, last year. We wrote a bill. It was called MAP 21. That stands for Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century. I was proud to see this bill become a bipartisan bill with Senator Inhofe working with me, with his staff and my staff working together as one. When we got it out of the committee, it was I think it was unanimous or close to unanimous vote. And I know when our young people learn how a bill becomes a law, it sounds a little easier than it really is. And I often think in my spare time I should write a little pamphlet on how a bill really becomes a law, because I would say to the young people who are here today, as well as those who might be listening, it's a little trickier than it sounds. Because when we learn about how a bill becomes a law in school, it's very simply put. You know, the bill starts in a committee in the House or Senate. It moves to the floor of that body. Then it starts in a committee in the other body. It moves to the floor of that body. It passes both chambers. If it's identical, it goes to the President. If there are differences, there's a conference committee. Then it goes to the President. The President either signs it or vetoes it. If he signs it, it's a done deal. If he vetoes it, you need to have a whole lot of folks, two-thirds, override. So that's how it's taught in the schools, and it's absolutely true. But getting it to the point we're at now, where we await a conference report, is sometimes a very long and winding path. This one was a long and winding path. And I think we are where we are at the point where we hope to vote soon on this, because people were willing to meet each other halfway. And I've been saying this for a long time. If we all stand in our respective corners and we insist that it's our way or the highway, nothing ever gets done. Nothing gets done. We must come together. And the Senate proved it could come together around our version of the highway bill. It passed by 74 votes. We were hopeful the House would just take it up and pass it. It didn't happen that way. They wrote a less comprehensive bill. They sent it over. And then we went into a conference committee, and there was a lot of difficulty because there were issues that were just simply not seen in the same light between the House and Senate. I would have to say through all of this, Senator Inhofe and I, the Republicans and Democrats on the EPW committee, were really united. But we didn't have that unifying factor with the House Republicans. And I want to thank every member of the conference committee, Democratic and Republican, House and Senate, because everyone worked extremely hard. They worked hard. They were knowledgeable. Their staffs worked hard. They asked a lot of questions. They cared a tremendous amount about the policies. Now, the great news about the bill that's coming out of the conference committee is that it's a jobs bill. First and foremost, it is going to save about 1.9 million, almost 2 million jobs that are currently held in the private sector, and it will create up to 1 million new jobs through an expanded TIFIA program. TIFIA is a program that fronts the funds for local governments who have a revenue stream, and the leverage on that is about 30-to-1. So if you have an approximately $1 billion amount, you'll be able to get $30 billion of economic activity. So that's a really, really good thing that we can all be proud of. That is a fact. The bill that we have coming, we hope soon, it's not here yet, it's not done yet, but it's close. And what we hope we will have before us is a bill that creates 2.9 million, let me say it again, that creates close to 2 million. You know, I am so tired, Mr. President. Will you forgive me? I have to say this right. I haven't gotten much sleep in the past 3 days because we've been working nonstop. I will say it again. We protect almost 2 million jobs that are currently held in the private sector, and we will create up to 1 million, hence the 3 million jobs that are relying on this bill. Now, we have thousands of businesses that care a lot about what we do. These are general contractors. These are equipment dealers. These are people in the concrete industry. I can tell you, Mr. President, that these organizations of business and labor have been behind us every inch of the way. And when I was giving up hope because I didn't think we could move forward, they were there to say, keep on going, and they weighed in, and I think the work product reflects the fact that we would never, ever give up. There's a lot of talk about what did Democrats give up, what did Republicans give up. Let us just say that this is a negotiation between Republicans and Democrats, negotiation between the House and Senate, and not everybody got what he or she wanted. That is for sure. But I just want to say to people who might be listening to this that in a negotiation, nobody gets everything they want. You have to meet each other halfway. And that's what happened in this negotiation. We both wanted to see this as a reform bill. The Senate brought a package together that took the 90 programs down to 30, and that pretty much survived the conference committee. And we also did some more reforms, certainly on project delivery, because all sides agreed it is taking too long to get some of these public works projects done. It's taking sometimes 15 years, 14 years, 13 years to do a road from start to finish, to do a bridge. We need to make sure that we can move faster because our economy needs that, but still, in my view, protect the rights of citizens throughout this country to ensure that their communities are taken care of, that there's no damage to their communities, that the air quality is protected, the water quality is protected, and we were able to keep those environmental laws there while we were tough on deadlines and milestones and very tough to say, this is it. If you can't finish in this time, and we're trying to get this from 15 years to 8 years per project, if you don't do that, you have to explain why. There has to be a really good reason why these projects will be delayed. I believe the funding in the bill is fair. Every single state is protected. Every single state. And this is a 2-year, 3-month bill, Mr. President. Every state will get the amount of money they got last year plus inflation. And that's very, very important. So it is the current level of funding with the inflation put in, and every state can now know, if and when this bill passes, that they can count on that funding for 2 years and 3 months. Everything is paid for. Now, there are a lot of comments about what did we do about pedestrian walkways and bike paths. I want to be clear. That was an intense subject of negotiation. There were those who wanted no funds set aside for bike paths, pedestrian paths, and it was very clear, safe streets, safe roads to school, etc. It was clear that we had to negotiate on this. So, honestly, I think what has come out of this is a good thing, and let me explain why. We kept the same amount of funding, same set-aside percentage for these transportation enhancements, alternatives. But what we said was, for the first time, that half of those funds will go directly to locals, will go to the metropolitan planning organizations, will go to the large cities. And that is very key because we want the local people who know their area best making these decisions. And we protected those funds, Mr. President. The only way anyone in the state could use those funds is if there's a nationally declared disaster. and there's some unobligated funds around, yes, that could be borrowed but must be paid back from any supplemental appropriation. On the state portion, which is the other 50%, we built in more flexibility, and there are a lot of people who are calling that a cut. Well, it isn't a cut. Some states will use it all. And I say to those people in the states who are worried about it, use your pressure, use your power, use your grassroots strength to make sure you lobby your state legislatures and your governors to provide for safe streets to schools, for bike paths, for pedestrian walks. These are very important safety issues. So I know not everyone is happy, but I wanted to be very clear on that. If a choice is between doing away with that wonderful program that I think is wonderful or having, making a few concessions on flexibility, I think we did the right thing. I honestly do. This bill, it's all paid for. I have to thank so much Senator Max Baucus and his team, his Republican members of the committee, Finance Committee, and also the team in the House headed by Mr. Camp, because they came up with a pay-for that people on all sides can live with, and it gives us that security for 2 years and 3 months. We don't have any riders on this bill. I know some people very much wanted it. We don't have them. It became part of the give and take at the end of the day. 2 provisions that I lament are not on there are the Oceans Trust Fund, which was part of the Restore Act, and the Land and Water Conservation Fund that was also part of the Restore Act. I lament that those provisions are gone. I commit myself to working with Senator Whitehouse on the Oceans Trust Fund and Senator Baucus on the Land and Water Conservation Fund to get that done. But I have to be completely, totally frank with the Senate. We just couldn't get it done. There was nothing that we could offer or give that would allow us to move forward with those 2 very critical environmental programs. And I will tell you, our oceans deserve attention, and our land deserves attention, and these issues are certainly not going away. Having said that, the rest of the Restore Act is in this bill. That means those folks in the Gulf states that were so harmed by this horrible BP spill will be able to use some of those fines as they come in to restore. That's why we call it Restore Act. Restore their environments, restore their fisheries, restore the damage that was done by that horrific BP spill. We don't know how much money will come from those fines. We will watch it very carefully, but we know when they do come. And if this bill passes, and I'm very hopeful it will, our Gulf states will have the help that they need. I want to say to the people, particularly in Louisiana, who I visited many times, your senators work very hard. I will say Mary Landrieu took the lead on this. Senator Vitter was on the conference, and I just want to say, Mary Landrieu, you know her well. She's unrelenting, and she was very, very clear with us. I want to say to my friend who's in the chair from Alaska how helpful he was to us in pointing out some of the great unmet needs that he is dealing with in his state. A beautiful state, a very interesting state that has very unique needs. And I just want him to know how much I appreciated his working with us, giving us the facts as we needed them, and also Senator Murkowski. But I particularly want to say, Senator Begich, thank you. You happen to be in the chair, and I really feel you were immensely effective for your state. But really, you made the case for fairness, and I hope that you feel comfortable with how this bill turned out. I have never met a team of more dedicated staff, never, 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 than I have seen. Again, they're not resting because we're not done. And until we're done, they're not resting. but we are talking seriously about the staff getting 3-4 hours of sleep over the last 2-3 days. The issues were still coming at us in ways we couldn't believe. At noon today, last night, we had to work out some issues. So it has been, in many ways, a very difficult negotiation, but certainly, if and when this bill comes before us and is passed, a very satisfying one. I have to mention Bettina Poirier, who is my chief of staff and chief counsel. I've never seen anyone more professional, more energetic, more persuasive. I have to thank her counterparts, David, Grant, Andrew, Jason, Tyler, Mary and Kate, and Paul, all of whom were just amazing. And if I left anyone out, forgive me. I will correct it in the record if I did. And I have to say to Senator Inhofe's staff, you were amazing and part of the team. We worked together. If we had disagreements, we talked them out. But for the most part, we were on the same page. So Ruth and James, you know who you are. You also have had a very rough few days and working very hard at this. I want to say that Congressman Mica's staff also worked very hard, and they're very tough negotiators. But we were able to talk out our differences. It wasn't always pleasant to deal with it because people see things in different ways, but we got it done. So we're not out of the woods yet in the sense that we don't have the bill before us. We are awaiting a decision made by the leaders as to when we will have this vote. But I would like to say I believe, as I stand here tonight, that really the work of the conference is completed, and that is very, very, very rewarding. The last thing I want to say is a huge thank you to the outside groups who have stood by my side this entire time. And I tell you that I've had conference calls with them for months and months, sometimes 4 times a week, sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes 6 times a week, seriously, sometimes on Saturdays, sometimes on Fridays, Mondays, whenever we needed to touch bases. This is an amazing coalition of people, people from workers, from organized labor, people from the construction trades. The Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO work together. That's a rarity, you know, in today's very difficult atmosphere where everyone is arguing over everything. The granite people, the cement people. And I want to say something to a gentleman, I won't identify his name, who brought a couple of his cement trucks, and we had a rally. And I think, Senator Begich, you were there. And after the rally, we were saying, pass the bill, get the bill done. I talked to this gentleman, and he identified himself as a conservative Republican who is so much for this bill. And one of the most, I think, touching things that happened was that he introduced me to 2 of his drivers who came over to meet me. And I realized as I stood there with these 2 gentlemen and the owner of the business, how much they were counting on us. What we do here matters. What we do here should matter. What we do here is literally life and death for the construction industry, for the business end and for the workers. And we know, our president and all of us, we all know that this economic recovery is too slow. And one of the things that's weighing it down is the construction industry. One of the things that is weighing it down is the transportation sector. And we know if we don't do our job, and we pass another extension here, that is a signal that the construction industry is going to suffer, and suffer mightily. And we cannot have that. And we are on the brink of getting this done. So I know I've left out a lot of people that I want to thank, and I don't have really a written speech here in front of me, and I will go back and I will correct the record if I left anyone out. But we're close to getting this done, whether it's in the next few hours or more than a few hours. I believe we'll get it done. And all the people who brought us to this day, I should mention Senator Reid, our majority leader, who just never gave up, even though I was, at one point, I'm sure he was ducking me as I walked around, because I'd always say, "Senator, let's keep going, Mr. Leader," and he did. He kept on going. And I think when we went over to meet with Speaker Boehner, that was a moment that was very important. With Chairman Mica, it was important. And I think it helped us at that point realize that everyone did want to have a bill. I have to say, the Democrats in the House, I'm sure it's been very difficult for them because they had so many priorities as well. But they were very clear, day after day, pushing hard for a bill until finally everybody came together and passed some messages to the conferees which said, "Get the job done." And everybody came together on that one, get the job done. So, Mr. President, for me personally, this has been a very important day. This is a day when I think we're very close to getting a transportation bill done. And it's also a day that President Obama will forever remember, where the centerpiece of his work was upheld as constitutional by the Supreme Court. We all know we cannot go back to the days when people with pre-existing conditions suffered and couldn't get insurance. We just can't go back to the days when being a woman was considered a pre-existing condition, and it was impossible for her to get insurance. We can't go back to the days when kids were thrown off their parents' health insurance at 18. We can't go back to the days that seniors were going broke, having to choose between a drug that was life-saving or having the dinner that night. These are all the things. You know, in my state, 6 million Californians, Mr. President, are getting preventive services. They're getting the mammograms. They're getting the cancer screenings. They're getting everything they need now because of this health care bill. 300,000 plus senior citizens are getting help paying for their prescription drugs, and 300,000 more students are now on their parents' insurance. So you're going to hear a lot of outrage about how this was a bad thing for America. Let me tell you, today I thought was a critical day for America. No piece of legislation is perfect. We'll have to fix this, that, or the other thing in everything we do, whether it's a transportation bill or a health care bill. But I think we need to move forward. We need to not go backwards. We need to make sure that health care in America doesn't become such an expensive burden for all of our people, because it just drags down our families and it doesn't enable them to do the kinds of things that they want to do for their kids, for their moms and dads. So I think today was quite a day for the history books. And I look forward to working across the aisle in everything we do here, whether it's transportation or health care or anything else, to make life better for people, not to make it worse, make it better for people. And I think if we all do that and we listen to each other, we can get things done. I want to thank you very much, Mr. President. I notice there's no one on the floor at this time, so I would note the absence of a quorum. Thank you.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to share a few thoughts about the Supreme Court ruling today and the status of the health care bill. I believe the health care bill cannot be justified as written and will have to be changed. It will have to be repealed, and we have to start over. It's just that simple. As ranking member of the Budget Committee, I began to look at the numbers we've had, and our team is going to redouble its effort in the weeks to come so that we can know precisely how much this legislation will cost. And as that becomes more and more understood by the American people, it will become clear we do not have the money to pass the bill. I know a lot of people are confident that it will undermine the right of an individual American to see the doctor of their choice. Despite the President's protestations, even I believe today, you will not be able to continue to keep your insurance. At least all people will not be able to. And there'll be other different problems. There's a real concern that under the legislation, the quality of health care will go down. And I believe that's accurate for a lot of reasons, and people like Dr. Barrasso and Dr. Coburn have explained that in great detail. But as a member of the Budget Committee, I wanted to share some thoughts about the financing of the legislation to raise the issue of why we cannot go forward with it. The President promised the American people before a joint session of Congress right down the hall in the House chamber, quote, "Now add it all up, and the plan I'm proposing will cost around $900 billion over 10 years. $900 billion is a lot of money. There's no doubt about that. But he said that's how much it would cost over the 10-year period. And as we all have learned, that was a gimmicked up number. It was fundamentally gimmicked up as a result of the fact that the cost of the bill, where it begins to pay out money and have real cost, and the implementation of the bill was delayed 4 years. So you take a 10-year window, and the bill is only going to be out there for 6 of those 10 years, and you announce it's only going to cost $900 billion. But that's not the right question, is it? The right question for the American people to actually understand the impact of the legislation would be to ask, how much would it cost over the first 10 years of full implementation? That's what you should be asking. We all know that, and so the numbers have come in on that. Under the CBO estimate, strictly adhering only to the insurance portion of the bill, I believe they came in as saying not $900 billion, but $1,400 billion would be the cost even over that first 10 years. But the true cost of the health care bill is yet higher still. A complete and honest assessment of the cost of the President's health care bill would include a full 10 years of spending, starting in 2014. Adding up CBO's estimates for the different provisions in the bill, the President's health care bill will amount to at least $2,600 billion, $2.6 trillion, not $900 billion, almost three times the estimated cost over the true 10-year period. Now, that's how we go broke in this country. That's how this country is going broke. We go through a whole debate, and the President insisted that that's how much the bill was going to cost. Members of the Senate said that. Members of the House, when the Democrats had filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, they had 60 Democratic senators, and they insisted that it was going to pay for itself. There was more revenue than needed to pay for the cost of the bill. Don't worry about it. Be happy. And on Christmas Eve, without amendments, after much secret debate, and a bill plopped on the floor, the bill was voted up or down, 60 votes to 40. Every single Democrat voted for it, and every single Republican voted against it. But I just got to say, the first 10 years of the bill is going to cost 3 times what was estimated. So in addition to delaying the major spending provisions during the original window of the legislation, here are some of the other accounting gimmicks, tricks, and maneuvers that the drafters used to manipulate the score that the Congressional Budget Office gave to the bill, to manipulate how much the Congressional Budget Office would say the bill cost, and to hide its impact. Well, one of the most significant things is they double counted $400 billion. Can you imagine that? The United States government, according to the score manipulation and the way it was done by the CBO, utilizing complex rules of the CBO to advantage, the way it was analyzed, they double counted $400 billion. So they cut Medicare expenses, they raised Medicare taxes, but they took the money and used it to fund the new bill and said they made Medicare more solvent. In some ways, you could argue they did make Medicare insolvent because the money that was spent on the health care bill was borrowed from Medicare. They're debt instruments from Medicare. So I would think, my analysis of the legislation is that Medicare got a benefit, but there was no money for the health care bill, but yet they counted it as being $400 billion free to be spent without adding to the debt of the United States. But it does add to the debt because Medicare is going broke. Medicare is going to call the debt from the United States. It increases the debt of the United States, $400 billion. It was counted both places as income from Medicare and income available to be spent on the health care provisions. That's a stunning development. I got a letter from the head of the CBO the night before we voted, December 23rd, and he said, in effect, not in effect, I think this is a direct quote, "It is double counting the money, although the conventions of accounting might indicate otherwise." He told us in a letter before we voted it was double counting the money. But under the unified budget process rule that was utilized here, it didn't score. So in addition, they counted $70 billion of extra income that would come from the Class Act, which was designed for young people. And the net result of that was, in the first decade or so of the Class Act implementation, healthy young people wouldn't make many claims, and there'd be a surplus of $70 billion. But over 20, 30, 40 years, The Class Act goes into serious decline. It's actuarially unsound. It was referred to as a Ponzi scheme by our Democratic Budget Chairman, Senator Conrad. Finally, the Secretary of HHS could not certify it as a sound program, so $70 billion has been wiped off that as income available to be spent. They included unrelated student loan savings, unrelated to this bill, of $19 billion. They relied on off-budget Social Security revenue for $29 billion, not scored in this as toward the cost of the bill. They ignored the cost of implementing the law. Imagine that. I mean, you have a bill, how much is it going to cost? It's going to cost $900 billion. Well, do you not score the cost of it? What about all these IRS agents, 1,000 plus 2,000 IRS agents that got to be hired and paid for? $115 billion not counted in the cost of the bill. Is this why we're going broke in this country? We score a bill, say it only costs $900 billion, and you got $115 billion of administrative costs not even counted. And then there was no permanent solution to the doctor reimbursement figure. To pay the doctors at the rate they need to be paid at, and I think most of us, I agree that they need to be paid at this rate, would be to cost $208 billion over the current level of expected spending. Because they're expected, if we don't have this doc fix, as we call it, doctors will receive a 20+% cut in pay for doing Medicare work immediately. They already paid less for Medicare work than they're paid for private insurance. Doctors would quit doing Medicare work if they took a 25% reduction in fee payments. That's $200 billion. That was one of the main reasons we were supposed to have comprehensive health care reform. The deal with permanently with this doctor fix, it was being fixed every year but not permanently. That's not what the bill didn't do it. The bill never fixed it, therefore leaving a $208 billion hole in the plan that we've got to find money for. And it's an essential part of all of that. So I would just say, my colleagues, that this cost is unsustainable. It will put us on a debt course that we cannot continue on. And we're going to continue to look at the numbers, and then I'm going to ask people if they desire to come to the floor and show if I'm wrong. Let me see where I'm wrong. But I don't think they can show that we're wrong, because I'm and my staff are working as hard as we can be to make sure that what we say about the cost of this bill is accurate and fair. And what does this do to the long-term debt of our country? That is a matter of great importance. One of the things that our government does now is it analyzes the unfunded obligations of the United States government. And when you pass a law that says everybody, when they reach a certain age, get to draw a Social Security check at so much money, and it increases on a percentage basis each year, that's an obligation of the United States. Well, that's an entitlement program, we call it. You're entitled to that whether the government has any money or not to pay it. So the health care bill is entitlement. It has a guaranteed right for individual Americans to receive certain subsidized health care benefits under this plan, and it's a permanent program. But it doesn't have a permanent source of income dedicated to paying for it in any significant fashion. And so it creates what the Congressional Budget Office refers to as unfunded liabilities, unfunded obligations. And to show Americans and Congress the true state of our long-term financial health. They do it over 75 years. It's not a perfect estimate, but it's a pretty good estimate of whether or not the programs are actuarially sound and what they'll do to the debt of America over 75 years. Under the numbers that we've seen from the CBO and the work of our committee, it's pretty clear that the health care bill that was passed by this Congress will add $17 trillion to the unfunded liabilities of the United States of America. $17 trillion. Not a little amount of money, a huge amount of money. To give perspective on how large that is, the Social Security unfunded liabilities over 75 years is only $7 trillion. This is 2.5 times as large an unfunded liability addition to our government as Social Security. And we're wondering how we're going to save Social Security. It's more than half of the unfunded liabilities of Medicare, or half of the unfunded liabilities of Medicare over 75 years. At a time when we have a serious, demonstrated requirement that we reduce the unfunded liabilities of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, this bill would add $17 trillion to it. This is why every expert has told us this nation is on an unsustainable debt course. The total unfunded liabilities before the passage of the health care bill was $65 trillion over 75. That trend, experts tell us, is unsustainable and threatens the future of our children and grandchildren. After the bill passes, it's $82 trillion. We don't have the money to do health care reform in this way with 2,700 pages and $17 trillion in additional costs to the Treasury. We don't need to affirm and repass a legislation that was said to cost $900 billion in the first 10 years. And in truth, in the first 10 years of its obligation, year after next, beginning then for the first 10 years, will cost almost 3 times that much, $2,600 billion. So it's a matter of great concern to me. As to the court decision today, I'm going to look at the bill, the court decision. We'll evaluate it. But I think it's additional proof that this health care legislation, from the beginning and in its entirety, a 2,700-page Rube Goldberg contraption that will never work. It's further proof of that. Even the fundamental justification for the legislation, that it was not a tax but a mandate, has been rejected by the court. The law was only upheld by saying it's not a mandate. In effect, it's a tax, that the sponsors of the bill directly said it was not. Indeed, the President said it was not a tax himself directly. So certainly this opinion that allowed the legislation to stand by the narrowest of 5-4 margins in no way is an affirmation of the wisdom of the bill, but is in fact a demonstration that the people who cobbled it together and who rammed it through without full floor debate and amendments, that scheme was flawed from the beginning and it won't work. Indeed, there's 1,700 references in that legislation to regulations to be issued by the Secretary of HHS. In other words, once the bill is passed We turn over huge sections of it to unknown bureaucrats who will issue regulations to administer this monstrosity. And it's just not a practical and decent way to do business. So, Mr. President, I felt like the bill clearly violated the interstate commerce power grant to the people and to the federal government. The federal government can only act and pass legislation if it's been specifically authorized by the Constitution. And one of the authorized powers was to regulate interstate commerce. But if a person's sitting on the creek bank in Alabama, not buying insurance, not participating, can he be made to buy a product in interstate commerce when he is explicitly not participating in that? I didn't believe it could be done. And the court agreed. The court rejected the Obama administration's argument that it did. They said the federal government has no power to compel you to participate in a commercial market when you don't participate. If you participate, maybe they can regulate it. But if you don't participate, they can't tell you to participate, because this is a government of limited powers. And it was a historic and important ruling that the Supreme Court made clear there are limits on the power of the United States government. I felt good about that. But now that Chief Justice Roberts and other members concluded, well, it may look like a mandate, but we call it a tax. And I haven't done the technical analysis that they went through to reach that opinion, but that doesn't seem correct to me. It seemed like it's still a mandate to buy something you don't want to buy. And that doesn't sound like a tax to me. Maybe it is. Maybe they can defend it that way, but I don't see how that's a tax. Sounds like a mandate and a penalty. So scholars will be reading that opinion for some time, and we'll know whether Chief Justice Roberts' analysis that this apparent mandate, apparent requirement that the President said was not a tax, now is a tax, and that the law is constitutional because of it. So we'll wrestle with that, but it doesn't deal with the fundamental question, can we afford this legislation? I say we cannot. I believe the facts are crystal clear that we cannot. We absolutely have to reform it, start over, create a health care system that works at a reasonable cost for the American people and does not burden our children with exorbitant debt that could throw us into a debt crisis at most any time, and in the long term could destabilize the health of the nation we love so much. Mr. President, I thank the Chair and would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Thank you.